What if the most successful people in the world aren't actually more disciplined than you? What if they don't possess some superhuman willpower that you were simply born without? Instead, what if they've learned a secret that most people will never understand? They've figured out how to trick their brains into actually craving the hard things. Most of us view discipline as a form of self-punishment. We think of it as a battle, a constant, exhausting war between what we want to do right now and what we know we should do for our future. We rely on willpower, but willpower is a finite resource. It's like a battery that drains every time you make a difficult choice, every time you resist a craving, and every time you force yourself to focus. By the time you get home from a long, stressful day, that battery is completely dead. That is exactly why you end up on the couch, scrolling through your phone for 3 hours, unable to muster the strength to do anything else. You aren't lazy, you're just out of fuel. But there is a group of people who operate on a different frequency. They don't force themselves to go to the gym, write that book, or build that business. They feel a strange, magnetic pull toward those activities. They've rewired their internal reward system so that the hard thing provides more satisfaction than the easy thing. Today, we're going to look into the deep neurobiology of discipline to show you exactly how to rewire your own brain to stop fearing effort and start craving the struggle. To understand how to trick your brain, you first have to understand the dopamine trap. Dopamine is the most misunderstood chemical in the human body. Most people think it's the pleasure chemical, but that's not quite right. Dopamine is actually the chemical of anticipation and motivation. It's the brain's way of saying, if you do this, you might get a reward. It's the itch that makes you want to act. It's the reason you reach for your phone the second you feel a hint of boredom. In our modern world, our brains are being hijacked by what psychologists call cheap dopamine. Platforms like TikTok, high-speed video games, and hyper-processed junk food provide massive spikes in dopamine with zero effort required. When your brain gets used to these high spikes for doing absolutely nothing, your baseline for dopamine drops. This is a biological disaster. When your baseline is low, you enter a state of anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure from normal things. Suddenly, doing something that actually requires effort, like studying, working out, or sitting in silence, feels physically painful. It's not that the task is hard, it's that your brain's reward threshold has been set so high that real-world achievements feel boring by comparison. The first step to tricking your brain into liking discipline is a dopamine reset. You have to intentionally lower your baseline by cutting out the cheap, easy rewards for a period of time. When you stop giving your brain the easy hits, it eventually becomes desperate for any source of progress. This is the biological turning point. Suddenly, the task you used to find boring becomes a stimulating source of dopamine because it's the only way your brain can get a win. You aren't forcing yourself to work. You are allowing your brain to finally enjoy the process of achieving something real. But there's an even more powerful part of the brain involved in discipline, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, AMCC. Recent studies in neuroscience have found that this specific area is the physical seat of willpower. Here is the mind-blowing part. The AMCC actually grows larger when you do things you do not want to do. It is a physical structure that expands when you lean into friction. Interestingly, in athletes and people who live to a very old age while remaining sharp, this part of the brain is significantly larger. Conversely, in people who consistently take the easy path, it shrinks. Think about that for a second. Every time you push through the resistance, every time you choose the cold shower over the warm one, or the work session over the nap, you are physically growing your brain's discipline muscle. The trick here is to stop viewing friction as a sign to stop. Instead, you must reframe that feeling of, I don't want to do this, as the sound of your brain leveling up. You have to start seeing that mental oog as the reward itself. When you feel that resistance, tell yourself, this is the exact moment my AMCC is getting stronger. By doing this, you are teaching your brain to associate the struggle with growth rather than the outcome with success. You start to crave the friction because you know that friction is the only thing that changes you. Another psychological hack to master discipline is called dopamine layering. Most people try to reward themselves after they do something hard. They say, "If I work out for an hour, I can watch Netflix." The problem with this is that it confirms to your brain that the workout is just a painful obstacle you have to survive to get to the good stuff. This actually makes you hate the work more over time because you are constantly reinforcing the idea that the work is a cost you have to pay. To crave the hard things, you have to find the dopamine inside the effort. You do this through interval rewarding. Instead of waiting until the end, you focus on the small victories within the task. You must learn to tell yourself, "I am doing this because I love the fact that it is hard." If you're writing, find a sense of win in finishing just one sentence. If you're lifting weights, find the win in the burn of the very first set. You are essentially training your brain to realize that effort is the reward. This is how world-class athletes and elite entrepreneurs work 16 hours a day. They aren't suffering, they are addicted to the feeling of the work itself. They have learned that the dopamine hit from a job well done is far superior to the dopamine hit from a distraction. Then, there is the power of the identity shift. One of the strongest forces in human psychology is the need to remain consistent with who we believe we are. If you tell yourself, "I'm trying to be more disciplined," your brain still sees you as a lazy person who is trying to be someone else. And when things get hard, your brain will inevitably revert to its true identity because it is comfortable there. To trick your brain into liking discipline, you must change the label you give yourself. You don't try to work out, you are an athlete. You don't try to write, you are a writer. When you adopt the identity first, discipline stops being an effort and starts being an act of self-consistency. An athlete goes to the gym even when they're tired because that's what an athlete does. It's no longer a debate, it's just part of your nature. Your brain will actually fight for the discipline because it wants to maintain the image you've created. Finally, we must talk about the 5-minute rule and the concept of activation energy. In chemistry, activation energy is the minimum amount of energy required to start a reaction. Once the reaction starts, it often becomes self-sustaining. Discipline is exactly the same. Your brain is terrified of the entire task. It looks at a 2-hour workout or a 10-page report and sees a massive energy drain, so it activates the stress response to get you to stay on the couch. To bypass this, you tell your brain a micro-Lee. "I'm only going to do this for 5 minutes. If I want to stop after that, I can." 90% of the time, once you start, the resistance vanishes. The hardest part of discipline is the first few seconds of starting. Once you're in motion, your brain enters a different state called flow. It stops worrying about the future and starts focusing on the present. By breaking the barrier of activation energy, you trick your brain into the state where work becomes easy. Discipline is not about being a robot or a martyr. It's about understanding that your brain is an organ designed for survival, not for success. It wants you to stay on the couch because the couch is safe and saves calories. But you are not your brain. You are the observer of your brain. When you learn to lower your dopamine baseline, lean into the friction of the AMCC, layer your rewards into the work itself, and shift your identity, something incredible happens. The hard things stop being the enemy. They become the source of your greatest joy. You stop chasing the cheap highs that leave you feeling empty and start chasing the deep satisfaction of doing exactly what you said you were going to do. You don't need more willpower. You just need a better strategy. Start today. Do one thing you don't want to do, and watch how your brain starts to transform. The life you want is hidden behind the work you're currently avoiding. Trick your brain into starting, and the rest will follow. Discipline isn't a prison, it is the only path to true freedom. Once you learn to enjoy the climb, the summit becomes inevitable.